Hi everybody, welcome. This is update 13, and thank you for everyone who is joining or is going to be joining. Some interesting things have developed today, of course. We're seeing a lot of stuff in the news that I don't need to go over. I think everyone's aware of what the numbers look like. Disappointing. I think when you're on the Johns Hopkins website, if you want to look at each country, look at the curve, because you're starting to see some countries flatten their curve. And as I mentioned in the video that I produced a couple days ago, that is done by changing behavior. It isn't done with any wonderful, miraculous new invention. Along those lines, we're seeing a lot of great ideas coming forward. The Bill Gates initiative, I think, is really very exciting. Looking at 10,000 small molecules to determine if any of them have efficacy and being able to evaluate that in very quickly. I think that's very exciting. We kind of broke the story about the anti-malarials maybe a week ago, and I think that there's potential there. The study that I quoted in, I don't know what episode it was, I'm sure you guys would know, really, however, was an in vitro study showing that that it was effective, at least in vitro, against this particular virus. But we're going to explore today in great depth much more about this particular virus. I want to tell you that I just finished about an hour ago an interview with a Dr. George Tetz, T-E-T-Z, an immunologist and virologist, and we'll post that as an Empowering Neurologist episode probably tomorrow. It was quite breathtaking that he has determined in his laboratory that the virus itself contains prion sequencing on its coat that is homologous with prion sequencing in this receptor where this virus binds to human cells. So it's well beyond the idea that this is just the next generation from MERS and SARS, that there are some very unique things going on this time around that perhaps would offer us some kind of treatment idea, but we will see. Wow, a lot of questions coming in. Okay, and I'll get to those. Hi from New York, Buenos Aires, etc. So we've had, and as I said in the introduction or in the title, more on ibuprofen. There's been a lot of talk about should we or should we not take ibuprofen. It's not a bad choice in general for pain as an anti-inflammatory if in fact a pain or a problem is caused by inflammation. But there was some discussion, at least in France, that it might be exacerbating this illness. So the study that came out in Science today talks about that this is misguided drug advice with respect to COVID-19. In other words, taking ibuprofen might not be as bad as they're saying. That the recommendation, I'm going to paste that, give you that link right now. So, as the pandemic continues to accelerate, French Health Minister Olivier Véran has confused matters by claiming on Twitter that anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen or cortisone could aggravate the infection. Stay tuned because I have more to say about this. However, scientific evidence does not indicate that nonsteroidal inflammatory drug NSAIDs consumption puts patients who have otherwise mild or asymptomatic infection at severe risk. Read the post. At the conclusion of this, author, Dr. Fitzgerald, is that people taking NSAIDs for other reasons should not stop doing so for fear of increasing COVID-19 risk. So we're hearing things on both sides of the equation. It's a little confusing how an anti-inflammatory would put you at risk. However, we know that NSAIDs are quite disruptive to the gut bacteria, and that disruption of the microbiome may have implications as it relates to inflammation, which is what gets people in trouble with this infection. So read the article. You're going to have to make up your own mind on this. I am staying away from NSAIDs. To treat a fever, I'm more likely to choose Tylenol. Anti-inflammatory drugs, interesting, they say, like ibuprofen or cortisone. Those are absolutely apples and oranges for people who are taking these medications. We're going to talk about cortisone and steroids in just a minute. In fact, we'll do it right now. This study came out in the Chinese Medical Journal. I'll send you the link rather, presently. And here it is. And the title of the study is Persistence of and Clearance of Viral RNA in 2019 Novel Coronavirus Disease Rehabilitation Patients. So this is something very important, and it gets to the question of what does it mean to test negative. Now, we're all assuming that when we are symptom-free and we have two tests to check this PCR test, the swab, if you will, for coronavirus, if that proves negative on 2 occasions, hey, we're good to go back to work, we're not going to infect anybody, and it's a wonderful day. I wish that were true. I'm hoping that's true, but here's what this new study in the Chinese Medical Journal tells us. Using this reverse transcription, polymerase chain reaction, RT-PCR results, which is the standard, pretty much the standard sampling way for testing, of the oropharyngeal swab, but also looking at stool, urine, and serum samples, here's what they discovered is actually interesting. So they took the convalescent patients, in other words, they're through with their illness. They're considered convalescent when they've had no respiratory symptoms, no fever, and as mentioned, have had 2 successive testing with a minimum of 24 hours between them that show that through the nasopharyngeal swab they are testing negative. Now, what they then did was they looked at these people who've been now tested negative, 292 of them, and they found, interestingly, that of these patients, 42% were women, 57%, 58% are men, that the median time from the first negative PCR test to have your first negative test when you're getting better is 9.5 days. So that's the median time. The average time that it takes, or median is actually not exactly the average. It's the number in the middle where half the group is before and half the group is after. Mean, median, and mode. Remember those terms? Anyway, 9.5 days after onset of symptoms until a person tests negative. But these individuals who are now testing negative, guess what? Here's what's important. Of the people who are testing negative, 17% are still testing positive as it relates to evaluating their stool. What does that mean? It means contamination in the bathroom, the stool. Things get from the stool to the faucets when you wash your hands, for example. So about 17% are still, about 2 days out, are still testing positive when they tested their stool. Urine samples, who knew? 7% of urine samples were also positive and still present after the swabs proved negative. Now, is it transmissible through urine? Don't know. Certainly likely to be transmissible through fecal contamination. This last part I think is very important. The duration of having viral detection, RNA detection in the stool was dramatically longer in people who were taking corticosteroids, anti-inflammatories. 20 days versus 11 days. So it gets back to that kind of a tangential recommendation that steroids are okay. Well, I'm not going to comment in terms of how they affect the disease process, but in terms of testing positive in the stool, 20 days versus 11 days in people who are taking steroids. Now, here's their conclusion. It is important to identify viral RNA in feces during convalescence because of the delayed clearance of viral RNA in the glucocorticoid or the steroid treatment group. They're not recommended in the treatment of COVID-19, especially mild disease. So here's the conclusion, that while a person may have had 2 tests proven that they're negative, oropharyngeal swab, They're asymptomatic. Their respiratory issues have improved, cleared up. They don't have a fever. They may still be shedding virus in the stool. Real important. If you're sharing a bathroom with somebody who has so-called recovered, they may still be infectious. Keep that in mind. Let me answer some questions. We've got quite a few people on board here today. Okay, so here we go. Hello from Illinois. Great. New York. Hope things are going well. Buenos Aires. I guess we looked at these already. Hello. Is it possible to have a very mild version of coronavirus without a fever? This is Brianne Denoyer. Absolutely. You can have no symptoms whatsoever and have this virus and transmit this virus. We've talked about that several days ago. It may be as high as 40%. What does that mean? It's actually good news in one respect. It means that a lot of these people may not be getting tested, and therefore the prevalence of this virus infection may be a lot bigger than we know. And if that's the case, then the death rate percentage might actually be a lot lower than what we are being told. In other words, if a lot of people have it and we still have the same number of people who are dying from it, then it means that that percentage is actually a lot lower. But keep in mind that people can spread this virus and have no symptoms. It argues in favor of two things. Number one, much more widespread testing, and number two, the notion of reducing your risk by social distancing and not being in crowds. Great. Yes, fasting all day today, that's for sure. We're going to have our break fast later this evening. The video's going around about 5G being the cause a hoax. I'm not going to comment on that. My opinion is it's not likely related in light of the fact that we've had infectious disease pandemics throughout the history of mankind. So my feeling is it may not be related. We're seeing coronavirus in many countries where there isn't as much 5G, but anything's possible. Am I scared of getting the virus? I don't think I'm living in fear. I'm keeping myself really busy being proactive, and that's keeping me away from fear. Fear, when you engage it by watching television all day, downregulates or messes up, if you will, the functionality of your immune system. So stay away from that. We wrote a book called Brainwash, and what Brainwash is all about is how you rewire your brain away from fear and make good decisions. That's the thesis of that book. So, okay, a lot of people saying hi. How long do I think it's going to be here in the United States? I think it's likely going to peak out perhaps in June from what I've read. I've only reporting what I've read. And from there, we're hoping that it is a precipitous drop in its infectivity. Fort Collins, Colorado, good. Ann Doherty, oh, wow. I know you from junior high, now called middle school. Okay, so great question from Petra Cripps. How many of these recovered patients are showing lung damage? Is there data on this? We're just beginning to see that there is a suggestion that some individuals are having some residual lung damage when they're tested negative. And think back about what we just talked about testing negative. So it isn't necessarily going to be that you had it, you're done with it, now you're immune and off you go. So there is some suggestion of both some pulmonary function issues that may be compromised, some suggestion that some cases, some people are developing what's called pulmonary fibrosis. Okay, does aspirin work? Can't find Tylenol. It will work to help lower your temperature. It is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, so you should consider that. Any word about blood type? Well, the data coming out seems to indicate that there is a worse outcome in type A blood type. Why that might be is unclear, but I think we're seeing that, at least some of the literature that is reporting that. Okay. Any news on antibody tests yet? So you can see. No, I've not heard if there's any antibody testing at all as yet that I'm aware of. Okay. Can it be living in the gut? Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you're passing it in your stool, it had to get there somehow, right? So we know that there are the receptors to bind this virus, which are called the ACE2 receptors, and that they are widely distributed throughout the gastrointestinal system. And it's the reason that, unlike the common flu, there's a higher risk of having issues like diarrhea and vomiting from this infection, though I recall it isn't that great. It's around 10% of people. Okay, let me take a few of these questions. Hi from San Francisco. Virus can stay 3 hours in the air. Does that mean if an infected person was in the store, the air is infected 3 hours? It's a tough question to answer. In the reports that I documented or read to you a couple days ago, when they were actually sampling the air in the hospital, they did not find it, though there were patients there who were not necessarily on ventilators and were clearly infected. They weren't finding it in the air, but they were finding it in the bathrooms, and they also found it on the air vents. It did collect on the air vents. They were able to recover it. So a good question. It's certainly something that we are definitely needing to think about. Again, that's why you stay away from people. It is the reason that you don't want to be in closed places with people or downwind from people. I mentioned that the other day. I mean, it's great to be 6 feet or whatever the magic number is away from somebody, but if they are upwind from you and they're passing by on their bike while you're out going for your walk and they cough or sneeze and they're infected, that could be an issue. So people upwind of you might be able to send these particles, or the mucus rather, in an airborne fashion over a further distance, so keep that in mind. Is there a single myth circulating around that I hear that I would like to bust? Yeah, I would like to bust one myth, and that is the myth that, well, I'm going to bust a couple, that, in my opinion. Number one myth is that you get it, you're done with it, and that's it, end of story. I think that may not be true. The other myth is that, my goodness, more people have died from the flu. Why are we all excited? There's nothing really to see here. And that is pathetic, in my opinion. I guess I'm entitled to that. Okay, I'll take a couple more questions, and here is an interesting point from Miranda Carter Paymer, and that is, my understanding is in severe cases, deprive vital organs of oxygen. Would HBOT, I'll explain in a moment, make a difference at that stage? What happens in some people when it's severe and ultimately terminal in many is what's called DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation or coagulopathy. And basically the blood just clots, and therefore it cannot deliver oxygen to the tissues and everything just shuts down. Could hyperbaric oxygen possibly help that? Yeah, I think it could help during the time of the treatment, but you can't stay in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber for too much time because you'll get oxygen toxicity. So there is some evidence that the dipyridamole might be useful in that situation, a drug called persantine, but it is an aggressive situation. It's the same thing that happens to your blood when you're bitten by a cobra. Okay, I'll take a couple more questions and then we will call it a day. Is the regular flu out there? Yes, it is. If so, has it peaked and is it on its way out? Probably, if you look at the seasonality of the regular flu. But people are getting sick and testing negative. Generally, I would suspect that means they have the flu. But we know that the testing is not 100% and is associated with a small number of what we call false negatives, whereby people have the coronavirus and nonetheless test negative. Okay, Yuma, hello. Who did it fast? I went 18 hours. Good, Colleen. I'd like to know how many of you fasted. It's a really, in my opinion, something to consider, at least in terms of wanting to do what you can to enhance your immune system. I'm stressing my body right now because I haven't eaten since we were all together last evening. I had dinner and that was it. So we know that even a 24-hour fast is a hormetic event, has some upsides. So I'm excited that many of you are reporting, oh, this is great, that you are fasting. Thanks for all your info on cleaning produce and boxes. Yes, I think that hard produce, carrots, things like that, probably going to be okay to wash them in soap and then leave them for a few days. Let them dry out. What really tends to kill this virus more than anything else is desiccation or being dried out. Okay, anything else in the question department? Okay, all right. I'm going to slide on over here. Yeah, and some people are saying that they saw in their news that NSAIDs are fine. So again, there are two sides to that story. A lot of people want to figure that part out. So, a lot of great information today, especially if you took home no other bit of information today, but the simple idea that people who test negative may still be shedding virus in their stool. The length of time they shed virus in the stool is significantly prolonged if they're taking steroids. That would be, I guess, the message of the day. Let me, if I may, read today's poem. Today's poem is by Burton Braley, who lived from 1882 to 1966. He is an American poet. And the poem is called, you're going to love this one, 1,000 to 1. Think about this poem in light of where we are today. There's 1,000 can't be doners for the one who says it can. But the whole amount of deeds that count is done by the latter clan. For the can't be doners grumble and hamper, oppose, and doubt, while the daring men who says it can proceeds to work it out. There isn't a new invention beneath the shining sun that was ever wrought by the deed or thought of the tribe of it can't be done. For the can't be doners mutter, while the can be's cool and sublime, make their notions work till the others smirk. Oh, we knew it all the time. Oh, the can be's clan is meager, its membership is small, and it's mighty few who see their dreams come true or hear the fame's trumpet call. But it's better to be a can be and labor and dream and die than one who runs with the can't be dones who haven't the pluck to try. So the message is hang in there, stick with it, can do, have a good attitude, and I am very appreciative of your attention. I will see everybody tomorrow. Good night.